A general what?
A general plan of how we're going to do this.
A general plan of how we're going to do this.
You named this. W2F are we doing?
Nah, we're not doing anything. We're just gonna start.
Fine. Well, we already started, so.
Did we?
Yeah. You're gonna edit it out.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the podcast that is yet to be named. It's either going to be called Rocco and Eliza Attempt to Make a Podcast, Coco and Lizzie,
or the Old People's Podcast.
The Old People's Podcast. My name is Rocco, joined here by my co-host,
Eliza.
And we are here to talk to you about, what exactly are we talking about?
Music.
But
because we can't put anything together, it's going to be all over the place.
All over the place. Well, it's our first podcast, so it's okay if it's all over the place.
I don't mind.
Yeah, it's fine. It's chill.
Life is all over the place.
Yeah, life is all over the place. But the way we started this, we were just like, hey, we constantly talk about music. And we used to have a radio show together in college about albums because we both have a love for listening to albums from beginning to end. So, which is how you're supposed to listen to albums. But we decided to make a podcast, and the first episode is going to be about albums because we figured it would be a very good starting point considering our music history here. And the way that we started this was by giving each other the challenge of listing top 5 favorite albums of the past 5 years. So that's since 2011, because this is 2016 for all you people and 3,000 listening to this. And
okay.
And we decided to make a list, and the only stipulation we had on this list was to use one album per band, so you can't just have 5 albums from the same band on your list. And they're very productive.
I would say mine are more close to a shorter time period because I listen to new music a lot, and Rocco doesn't believe in anything past 1970.
I'm an old person, okay?
That's why this could be the Old People's Podcast.
I'm an old person. But how about this? How about we start with number 5, you do number 5, and then I do number 5.
I don't even have an order.
You then just do your first one, and then I'll do... I ordered it, but it's not like an order that like I'm sticking to. It's just an order that came to me at 3 a.m. last night while I was typing these out on my phone.
Okay. All right, so I'll start with mine. The Balcony by Catfish and the Bottlemen. That came out 2 years ago, and they're coming out with a new album this year, but you know what, the market of like alternative indie rock is so saturated. Like, it's the Strokes and you know, the 1975 and all that stuff, and a lot of it to me is garbage. But
my number 5 is the Strokes. No, I'm joking.
No, stop. I'm going to see the Strokes, and I appreciate like how they affected the rest of that genre. But I think it's mostly like the repetition of the same crap.
Well, that's what most genres are starting to become. Is that everyone's just used to the same sound.
Yeah.
So it's just like, and as you're naming this album, I'm shaking my head because you actually got me into this band and got me into this album. So I do have this on my current Spotify playlist that I listen to.
I have a story about this album.
Sure.
When I first heard of them, I only saw Van, the singer, on a talk show, and he didn't perform. They didn't perform or anything. I saw him for maybe 5 minutes or something like that, and I was like, that guy is so chill. And then I saw that they were going on tour, didn't listen to anything, and I bought the ticket. And I went to the show, and it was probably one of the best shows that I've ever been to. And I've seen them 3 or 4 times since then. But that album, I don't know, it just sounds fresh in the genre.
It definitely does. It sounds very different. It has definitely a lot of British alternative mixed in it.
Yeah.
Like, you could tell just from, like, the twang of the lead singer's voice and a lot of other elements of the song. It definitely incorporates a lot of, like, British alternative into mainstream pop alternative.
But I think what's good about them, and Van in particular, is that he's a fan of that music, so he knows what's really good. He knows what's really nice, and brings that in. Like, he's a huge fan of the Killers, and you can hear that.
Yep, you definitely can. And my number 5 album, and before I say this, Eliza is going to eye roll so hard that you're going to hear it as she eye rolls. is Adele's 21 that came
Why
out
am
in
I gonna eye
2011.
roll? That is such a good album.
It is a great album, but I figured you'd be like, oh, of course, you just pick a really popular album and make it on your list.
I really like that album.
It's on my list as my number 5 because to me, it's not necessarily that every song off that album is amazing, even though they're all very good. I have something to bring up about Adele a little bit later, but they're all very good songs. But it's just the matter of breaking the mold of pop music, and it was like one of the first albums of this decade that really broke through the pop scene as like you can just listen to music. You don't have to do anything to music, and I feel like that's a big problem with pop music nowadays.
You mean that her approach is just simplified?
Her approach is just that it's very soulful music that you listen to. I feel like a lot of music nowadays, if it's poppy, even if like it's like All of Me by John Legend, like how quickly did they turn it into like a dance track for like whatever?
Yeah, it has
and then
to be packaged into many like multi-level marketing for every type of.
And I feel like that album was like the first one in a while that really came out, and it was like, this girl doesn't need to dance. She doesn't need to entertain you with what she does. All she needs to do is walk out there and belt, and everybody pays attention. And it was something around her performance at the Grammys, performing Rolling in the Deep, was one of the most recent must-sees that I just remember, the hype building up to her performance at that show, which I believe was the 2012 Grammys, if you want to look it up. I remember the whole night, they were like, Adele's performing Rolling in the Deep. And it wasn't packaged like, oh, this pop singer is singing whatever. Like, it's not like Taylor Swift performing Bad Blood. It was like, oh my God, Adele's performing Rolling in the Deep. Stop what you're doing.
She's just so talented. Like, it's like beyond just music. She's just so talented. But if you because she went to school with someone like Jessie J, and she's friends with someone like Paloma Faith. I think Paloma Faith is super underrated. She has a beautiful singing voice, if you want to look that up. I mean, just stunning. But Jessie J took another avenue, and she did that packaged pop star, like I don't know if she danced, but you know what I mean, like a very like showy kind of thing, and her voice, wonderful. She could sing almost any song, honestly. To me, I think she can, obviously in her style, but she's a great singer. But where is Jessie J now? Like, that's sad to say, but I haven't heard about her in a long time.
Yeah, well,
because the gimmicky thing didn't work for her.
Yeah, that's, that happens in pop music all the time too.
Of course, but I'm just saying, there are people who are just made. She could have done something like Adele did something. Because there are people out there who have the potential to do that, and then they don't. And then gimmicks work for some people, gimmicks don't work for others. Like Lady Gaga, right? Beautiful singing voice. I've seen her live, and her voice live is even more incredible than what you see on TV and everything. Yeah. But she's a gimmick, but she makes the gimmick work for her. Yeah. And I feel like she did a really good job of the past few years breaking out of her mold. And I feel like she needed to do that because now, in my opinion, Lady Gaga is now in that echelon with Adele as being like a premier like voice of our generation. Whereas before she was more of a character, and now she's like kind of like what Barbra Streisand is for like our parents. Yeah. Yeah, and it's one of those things where I look at Lady Gaga and the way that she took care of herself and her image over the past 5 years, where she came out with these monster hits when she first came out. And then, as time went on, she realized she needed to establish some sort of credibility with herself. So, the way that she went about establishing credibility is she went out and did an album with Tony Bennett, and she appealed to the older audience at the same time, proving that she doesn't need the pop genre needs her. And I feel like that was something that really needed to be established. Yeah, I think what you said there is very important, that they are necessary to make pop music work, not that pop music took them and person, a character, like you said.
And I really feel like that's been a bigger topical issue nowadays, because if you look at like the whole Kesha situation, not to get too deep into that, but the Kesha situation is proving that record label, Sony Records, believes that pop music is bigger than her, which in a way it is, but she should prove that she should be the most important thing in this entire thing, besides the human rights issue and besides all the politics that go in this.
Just to add to that, I mean, I think she as a songwriter, aside from her coming out with her album, she's written songs for so many people, and I think she knows her value. And her fans know her value, and people who are familiar with her breadth of work, aside from just her albums, are familiar with her value. But record labels, because we all know they're strapped for it.
Yeah.
She's an object.
Mm-hmm.
She's irrelevant. So, I think the whole discussion with Kesha is something for another episode.
Yeah.
But I think that just tells you how they're treating their artists.
There'll definitely be a music and politics kind of thing happening pretty soon, especially with us being such big like lyric fans and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's gonna happen.
I think it's gonna be good.
All right, number 4.
The Chaos and the Calm by James Bay. I love James Bay. James Baymax, James Tedder Bay Biscuit. I think that album is so good. Like, you know how like someone says, I mean, he's had songs before that. He's had, like, EPs before that. But you know how, like, you can tell when someone has, like, really taken the time to, like, hone their writing skills and, like, and this is the album they wanted to put out? That's how I feel when I listen to that album. I have a story about that one, too, that's similar to the Catfish and the Bottlemen one.
Oh, yeah?
That I was on BuzzFeed, and they had a video of him performing Scars, and I watched 30 seconds, and I was like, oh, my God, where is he? I have to go see him. And then I saw that he was playing in New York, but it was totally sold out, which I totally understand. And then I bought tickets on StubHub at like a premium, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna hate myself for this. It was honestly such a privilege to hear him live.
That's
awesome.
awesome.
It was just unbelievable. And I think that's another thing that I find important about the albums that I like as a whole, that it has to be good live. So these are things, you know what I mean? Like, It has to be an element that you can tell this is gonna work with a crowd. Or this is going to be good in a setting. And I mean, it's hard when you have a singer-songwriter and it's a very, very big setting. So I was glad that I paid to watch him in a small venue before he got very big.
I think it's also a big challenge for bands because I feel like there's a big precedent for bands to go big on albums right now and to be very extravagant and to do things in the studio, which is totally fine because that's been happening for decades and decades. But to do things in the studio that you might not be able to translate live, but then there becomes the idea that you need to hold up your end of the bargain and do that live.
I think the issue with that is that some bands think with the audience in mind and they go too big, and then it doesn't translate like you said, and you can't really create the same effect. But I think there's also, I'm going to talk about another album a little bit later. There's also something really good about keeping the audience in mind, but keeping it simple. So it's like, I'm going to enjoy that simplicity. I'm going to enjoy, I'm here for you to understand what you're coming to say to me one-to-one, as opposed to bands that are like, I have to blow this up into some kind of crazy spectacular. Not everything has to be a circus.
Mm-hmm. Well, my next album, my number 4, is a total circus, but it is a wonderful circus that everybody in this room has seen live right now.
What?
It is Some Nights by Fun, is my number 4 album.
That is a great album. I'm surprised
and it is
I
a
didn't put
total
that.
spectacle and a total circus.
You want to know what? Even though I think that album is a spectacle, there's a lot of layers to it, and as you know, I related to Queen the way he sings.
Oh, yeah.
But there's also such a simplicity about the lyrics, and I think the message and all the things that they're trying to convey there, that even though it's a spectacle sonically, there's still ease of communication.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like one of the great things about Fun is that they really did a great job of putting together this insane album and being able to just nail it live with almost no help at all. Like, they have, like, a touring band, but they don't need, like, backtracks. They don't need, like, backup singers. They don't need anything. They just have so much talent just pouring out of them, especially Nate. That dude's insane. He hit one of the highest notes I've ever heard a male singer hit. In, what was it? Some Nights?
Yeah, Some Nights.
Yeah, Some Nights. He hits that note where I don't know if it's... I guess it's not auto-tuned in... I know he hits some auto-tuned notes, but it's mostly for effect in the song. I'm trying to think of... Yeah, that note was just incredible. I remember hearing that note and almost being knocked backwards. Because I thought he was going to, like, lowball it and go, like, an octave down because it was a lot. And then when he hit it, That was it. And that the
Really?
concert that we went to is at Terminal 5, and they actually used that concert for the Carry On music video. So if you ever want to know what concert we saw Fun at, go look up the Carry On music video. It was that crazy pit of just people going crazy, and that was the concert we were at, and it was just wonderful. It was a wonderful experience, and that album was one of those albums that made me believe in popular music. I feel like before that album came out, I really didn't get behind a band that topped the charts.
Old People Podcast.
Yeah, well, no, it's one of those things where I never had the experience, because most of the bands I really enjoy are older. I never had the experience of following a band while they rise. And with Fun, I got into them right before they released Some Nights, and I got to really experience that. And now I'm experiencing that with a few bands. Believe it or not, none of those bands are on my list because they still have a little bit to prove to me. But it's
wow.
Yeah, well, I have high standards. I have high standards for music, and I feel like if you listen to music, you should have high standards. You shouldn't compromise or dumb yourself down.
I don't think it's dumbing yourself down. I mean, sometimes you just have to listen to something that's garbage and enjoy it. Like, do you want to know what? To be honest, if you like the sounds inside your ears, good.
Yeah, totally. For me, the sounds I like inside my ears tell a story. And, it's like watching TV and saying that you don't like watching, Real World because it's garbage TV. Opinions. Ooh, opinions on the internet. But instead you'd prefer to watch, Mad Men because it's, compelling and whatever. And I don't watch Mad Men, so I don't know anything about this. But I'm just saying, it's the...
Yeah,
you
have your preferences.
Yeah.
But, you listen to whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Because then you find out. Because I think the thing is also... I think this could be a whole other episode, to be honest. But I think a lot of people will agree that what happened in middle school really kind of dictates...
Oh my god. We could have a 3-hour middle school episode.
But I think what happens in middle school when you listen to music, that really shapes who you are as a music person.
Yeah.
I think it really does, because that's when you're, coming of age and you're really trying to... You may not listen to the same exact bands, obviously. I listen to the same bands.
Whenever a song comes on that I listened to in middle school, I can't help
the nostalgia.
but just go right back to feeling insecure about everything in my life.
But listen, sometimes the thing that worked for you could have been Blink-182. For other people, it could have been Eminem.
Yeah.
I'm staring right at him. You can't see it, but he knows. So
It was Kanye West, okay?
Okay.
Leave me alone.
Yeah, right.
I was the first kid in my school to bring College Dropout in. And everybody was impressed. They were like, oh, is that Jay-Z? I was like, no, it was Jay-Z. I didn't know who Jay-Z was. Because Jay-Z does a couple of tracks with him because Kanye was Jay-Z's producer, blah, blah, blah. But...
See, that could be a whole other episode.
That could be a whole episode. That's great.
Do you want me to tell you the third one?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay. Limitless by Tonight Alive. That came out a couple days ago.
No.
And people were like, oh, well, it's only been a few days.
Quick turnaround from this one.
Yeah, how can it be... Listen, it is so good. I really think, Tonight Alive, I've followed them. I've had that experience of following them since they started. And their music's pop-punk. They fall into that genre. I mean, they go on tour with All Time Low and things like that. But this album, I feel like this is the album that Jenna really wanted to make. I feel like all the guys really wanted to make this album.
Yeah. As
opposed to just appealing to that pop-punk kind of thing. And I saw an interview with her the other day that people were upset because it's so different from what they usually do. I don't think it's that different. To me, it just sounds like a natural progression. But because I'm old, I know what it means to mature in your music. But she was like, you can't tie a band or a person to the same things that they were doing in middle school. Yeah. Which you just mentioned. But you have to grow with what you're doing. And I feel like this album was just, oh my God, it's just so good. I can't get over it. And she's one of the best singers I've ever heard live.
Yeah, you actually sent me this album to listen to a few days ago. I'm assuming it was the day it came out because you gave it to me 4 days ago. And you said...
was the day after, because the day after it came out, I went to go see them at Irving Plaza.
Okay.
I was Rocco needs to listen to this immediately right now.
Yeah, I listened to it, and I have to say there were a few songs that really jumped out at me and made me like really enjoy it. And to preface, I've never really listened to Tonight Alive, so this was really my first experience in listening to the band, and it's one of those things where when you showed it to me, I was thinking about going on like their Spotify channel and like going through their history, and then I thought better of it because I figured it would be a really good way, because you're already a big fan. Yeah. And I figured it would be a really good way to tackle this band is just by listening to their most recent release and going through it. And I felt like one of this album's big strong points to me was its ballads. I felt like it had really good, like when they tried not rocking, for example, like they really hit it. Like their production style was perfect for like a ballad, like a nice, powerful ballad. She has the voice for it. And it worked really well. I felt like their rock music was a little bit overproduced. It was still very good, but I felt like they tried to make it into a pop hit.
We have to remember this is a pop-punk band and who they have to appeal to. So I understand that, but I think the album as a whole, you know what I mean? Like the story of the album? Nice.
This isn't on my list, and there's no way on earth I'd put it on my list. Even though I do think it is a decent album. Dream Theater, which is a progressive metal band, for those not in the know of Dream Theater, released an album. I don't even remember the name of the album. I'm the worst. But they just released an album, and they like telling stories, so I'm really into what they do. And it was a 35-song album or something like that. And
Jesus
I ended up
Christ.
Yeah, it was a huge album. It was huge. And I ended up listening to it, and it was just this insane piece of music. Like, it was like 30 characters in this opera they were singing about.
Rock opera.
And well, it was a rock opera, but it wasn't like Tommy, because in Tommy there's like 4 characters in the Who's Tommy. There's like 4 characters along with the main character. And
it's more digestible than...
Yeah, and I feel like most rock operas are like that. Dream Theater came out with a rock opera in 99, which if we were doing the past like 15 years, this would be like number 2 or 1 on my list of albums from the past like 15 years. And it's called Scenes from Memory. And it has only 5 characters, and it's so compelling. And the music tells most of the story, not the singing. And it is so good that I had such high hopes for this. And then when they came out with this, they're trying so hard, you know? Like, when bands try so... Like, I love stories. I love when lyrics mean something, when you hear emotion in them. But when you try so hard to do something, it just hurts, you know? Like, it was a real chore for me to sit there. It was 3 hours.
That's what I'm saying. It's forced.
It's like watching, like, a Michael Bay film. Like, it's 3 hours of music where I just sat at my computer with my nice headphones because I wanted to listen to it. And I found myself doing anything but listening to it because I couldn't, like, it was such a chore.
You couldn't be bothered.
It was such a chore, but I wanted to because I wanted to hear, like, how everything went. But, like, by the end of it, there was just, it was way too much. But my number 3 is, again, a little bit of a successful pick. Most of these are pretty successful, but is AM by the Arctic Monkeys.
Yes!
Yeah.
See, like, Arctic Monkeys and Catfish and the Bottlemen and The Killers are, like, the only 3 of that genre that I'm like, yeah, all right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you got this.
Arctic Monkeys.
I love Arctic Monkeys.
And not to mention, Alex Turner just oozes appeal.
I love Alex Turner.
Alex Turner is, like, one of those guys, he's like a charisma machine. Like, if you ever watch the Arctic Monkeys play anything live, their lead singer just oozes like a rock star.
Yeah,
like,
he's a frontman.
Yeah. Like, he's one, like, there's this one performance of their main single off of this Do I Want to Know, where he's just performing, like, at, like, a late-night talk show in England, and there's just, like, a crowd around him. Like, they're not seated. They're just standing in, like, a semicircle around him. And I'm sure, like, if you look it up, it'll probably be one of, like, the first things you find. And he's playing
and
this...
all of them are deceased, because I would be.
Yes, it's very similar, where, like, he's playing, he has, like, this white button-down shirt with the collar open, like, 3 buttons down.
Listen, this is very specific.
I'm telling you, I remember this. And he's playing this insane 12-string. Like, you've never... Like, most people don't play guitars like the one that he played in this. And he was doing, like, these like Elvis movements like with the song, like dry humping to the song, kind of like how
really
Elvis used to do.
changed your life,
but
huh?
no, I just remember watching this and I'm like, this dude has charisma.
No, he really does.
And like a swagger about him that most people in like that was the kind of stuff that made rock appealing in the first place, like that kind of
yeah,
attitude.
because there's some kind. It's kind of like it's almost a taboo.
Yeah.
Kind of.
And it was one of those things where you could watch, like the camera was on him, but watching him, everybody in the audience, you could tell they were like all the women were getting weak. Like all the women's knees were quaking as this guy was performing. And some guys. Like I was quaking in my chair, okay? Like this dude
but he's very entrancing, like.
Yes.
I get it.
Very much so.
He's
He
like
has a great
snake
voice.
Charmer.
Yes, he's like a snake charmer, but for millennials. He's a millennial snake charmer.
Oh my god, I'm gonna call him that like from now on.
Yeah, you should. He's like the Pied Piper of millennials.
That's funny. That's funny. My next one, my fourth one, is Pioneer by The Maine. I would live and die for The Maine, as we all know. I have 2 tattoos from that band. Pioneer is the first album they did on their own. They left their major label. They were at Warner. Warner? Yeah, they were at Warner. But it was, it's a very difficult experience for a very small band to go to a big label and they can't do anything they want. And then they left, and then they put out Pioneer, which is just... That's like the kind of music I think they want to write. I say that for every album, but like how you could just tell when an artist is really into what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
That's what makes a good album to me. Like they really believe in what they're giving to you.
Yeah.
And this album, story-wise, there's a lot of melancholy in it,
Mm-hmm.
but there's also a lot of like freedom. And I first listened to this band when I was in high school because I went to high school in Arizona. And they were like a little band out there.
Mm-hmm.
And they put out that pop punk overproduced thing. But at the time, that was it. That was what was hot. And when I listened to this album, it's so new and fresh for them, but there's such a nostalgia of being in Arizona and like remembering all those good times when everything was much more simpler. And I think that's what they're trying to convey in this album. Like they want to get back to being that kind of simple band, but making their own kind of music that they want to make. And I just can't get over it. I think this album is so good. They had a couple of albums afterwards. American Candy, which came out last year.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to also put that, but we could only put one album from per artist. But I think they've just grown so much. And John has become such a good writer. I'm floored.
Yeah.
I'm honored to be inked by them.
This is what I love about your list, is that it's all albums that really mean something to you.
Yeah.
And that's something that I really like, because my list is mostly just albums that like I enjoyed, but like they didn't
change your life.
Yeah, they didn't change. They're not life-changing to me. They might be life-changing to some people, but they're not really life-changing to me. They're just albums that I really liked. These albums, like, affected who you are.
Yeah, like, they shape me as a person.
Yeah,
that's what I
crazy.
think is good. But that's how I know something's good. Like, if I've completely changed my mindset after listening to an album, I'm like, wow, that was something. Like, if I listen to an album, it could be good, but if it didn't, like, blow my mind, then whatever. For example, I would even put Purpose by Justin Bieber on this list. That's a great album. Did that change my life? No.
That was a very different album, an album that he needed. And I'm not...
God, it's so good. I honestly bought it. That's how good it was. I didn't just listen to it on Spotify or Apple Music. I bought it. But it didn't change my life. It's not going to be on this list.
Yeah. One of the things that people that even have like a little bit of a clue about who I am know is that I am a huge, huge Beatles fan. Number one for life. All that. So... that being said, I can't just dismiss one, like, pop act because they're commercially successful and they target the 14-year-old girl demographic, because my favorite band got popular doing that too. So I can't just dismiss someone for something like that. So I always give people a try, and I always give people the benefit of a doubt for evolving. I always give people the benefit of the doubt for evolving. But, like,
But I think it's important that you listen to, if you really are like a music fan for music's sake, it's important that you listen to stuff, even if you don't usually listen to it, because at least I think it's just stupid to be uninformed about what's going on. So, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I think
absolutely. I feel like...
Why limit yourself?
Even if you don't like pop music, I still think it's something that you should listen to just for at least history's purpose of it, to see like where pop music goes. Like that's something that always interested me, even like before I got into pop music, is like the progression of pop music, and to actually now be in like the living through. I mean, I always was, but now that I'm like really into music, and now that I'm living through like the progression of pop music, even if I'm not a fan, I can appreciate the fact that that's what's popular right now.
Yeah, you know what's going on.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where I can look at that album by Justin Bieber and go, that album, I don't really enjoy it personally. It's not my taste in music, but I understand why it's good. I understand why people like it. And I understand why, it's so successful.
It's so good. Oh my God, it's so good. I don't get it. I mean, I get it, but you know what I mean? Like, it's just another level.
Yes. And speaking of I getting it, my number 2 album of the past 5 years is an album that I got months before it came out. An album that I got months before it came out, because I've been talking about it since we were at Baruch together, is Wasting Light by the Foo Fighters.
Oh my God. Okay, yeah.
When that album got hinted, I was not a big Foo Fighters fan. I wasn't. Before this album came out, I was not that into them. And then they released a little snippet, like a 5-second, clip of their next album, and it was going to be the first song off their next album, and it was just 5 seconds of just pure, dirty rock and roll. The likes that nobody releases music like this. It's just one of those clips that when I heard it, it just dragged me in, and I was like, I'm listening. I'm going to be with you all the way on this album.
Yeah, father, Dave Grohl.
Yeah, her father is Dave Grohl.
I believe Dave Grohl is my dad. My real dad.
Mm-hmm. Dave Grohl probably...
And Proof is in that album.
Yeah.
Because Proof. It's so good. It is a really good album.
That's one of those albums that, front to back, I could listen to that album any day of the week, any time of the year, no matter what mood I'm in. I could listen to that nonstop. That's probably the only album on my list, even though it's my number 2, that affected me in any way, was because it made me a huge Foo Fighters fan. I went to go see them. I'm wearing one of their tour shirts as we're doing this. It's one of those things where I really needed this album in my life.
No, that's good.
Yeah.
It's a good album. And this is my last album. By the way, none of these were in order for me. They were in order for you, but definitely not for me.
We didn't specify order, so I just ordered them because I ordered it.
But also, it's for me, I can never say something is better than something else if it's different. Yeah. Even within a one band's discography, I'm like, I can't. It's like picking your favorite kid. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's awful. The last one I have is White Noise by Paris. And Paris came out this last year or the year before. And they're on tour with Fall Out Boy now, so that's good for them. They were playing big arenas. But I saw them in the basement at Webster Hall. Mm-hmm. And maybe a month or 2 after this album came out, it was really close. And it is just so... I think, again, the album as a whole sounds like one continuous story.
Yeah.
And I just think they're all really talented. And live, it's incredible. I love Lynn. I think she has a beautiful voice. That's another thing I really like. Vocally, I find if the album's good vocally, I tend to enjoy it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I got to see them live a few weeks ago with you, actually. That was pretty cool. Yeah,
and I was like, watch my wife.
Yeah.
Because I really like this album a lot. I think that it's pop... do they count as pop punk? I guess. I mean...
Kind of, actually...
They're sort of like an indie...
Yeah, they're very indie, they're very ambient. They kind of remind me a little bit of Foster the People without the dance music.
Yeah, it's better than weird hipster music, but not all the way to that quote-unquote rock side like pop punk. Mm-hmm. So I think also that's what I really liked about them, that they found a niche that... I'm sure there are other people doing something similar, and there are thousands of bands doing something similar like that, but I feel like they found a niche that was really good for them.
Yes.
And that album is really good. I wish they'd release a second album instead of repackaging this last one with a new single.
Yeah.
But it was a really good album. I listened to it.
I listened to it. Way to pitch the album to the masses. I listened to it.
If I listen to it, you should listen to it. Because I'm an expert.
Liz, expert at music. Well, I mean, kind of. I mean, what qualifies expert?
Exactly. So I could be an expert of this. Just listen to it.
How many years of music experience do you have to put on your music PhD? Your music listening PhD?
From the womb, at least 24 years.
From the womb. There you go.
Listen, my mom used to listen to the Backstreet Boys and things like that and put the headphones on her stomach. So, like, New Kids on the Block and things
I was
like
going to
that.
say, Backstreet Boys?
No.
In, like,
Backstreet
1991?
Boys started in, like, when I was born.
Really?
Yeah, like, they were, like, being put together. So that whole thing, like...
I thought it was, like, 97 when they came out with their first album.
Here. But they did
Gotcha.
Europe first.
Oh, the more you know.
Yeah, you
Backstreet
learn
Boys
something.
did Europe.
But like things like New Kids on the Block and Bobby Brown and things like that. She put the headphones on. See, I have such expertise.
You know, it all makes sense now, let me say. My last album is one that I don't have too much to talk about because I feel like it really talks for itself. And also because it's really new, like it's only a few months out, is Black Star by David Bowie. And that's one of those albums that the music means a lot, but the idea of it means so much more. Because David Bowie is one of those artists that he always put his music before himself. And the idea that he knew he was going to die for a few years and spent the last few years of his life just working on this piece because he wanted it to be like his goodbye to the world is something so beautifully artistic that I feel like only he could do and do well. And he really did. If you listen to that album, it's just beautiful. And I feel like Johnny Cash came out with the song, he covered Hurt by 9 Inch Nails right before he passed away, and they made it into a music video, which is very, very emotional, especially because it's a cover of a modern song that he did. And this album is very much in the same way for me, where it's kind of like you're listening to a man's goodbye to the world that gave him so much love and so much heartbreak, so much emotion that he got to convey into music for everyone to enjoy. And like this was like his goodbye. And I feel like this album is one of those that should not just be faded into obscurity. It probably will.
Yeah.
Because I feel like most
it's not as significant as his other...
Well, not even that. I feel like most albums from older acts, especially from like the 70s that come out now, I feel like they get like popular and then they just kind of fade away into the back of their catalog like it doesn't matter. Or the back of like the pop world.
But I think that's also like if you think about who's buying, who's promoting, who's doing the stuff for albums these days. That's why Top 40 is the way it is. Because it's kids. The kids who's doing it.
That's why in Top 40 you'll still see songs from like 2011 on Top 40.
Yeah, because people don't even know that they're not in 2011. You even said before we started this that you were looking at albums and you didn't realize that some of these were from like 2009 or something like that. Because if you're not like the avid listener of this new stuff, then that's it.
Yeah.
They go away.
Did you by any chance do a list of your favorite all-time?
No, because I can't do that.
Okay.
But I do have an honorable mention.
Okay.
So my honorable mention for these last couple years, it's not an album, it's an EP. That's why I made it an honorable mention.
Okay.
Is All or Nothing by Juliet Sims. I would also live or die for Juliet Sims. I think she has one of the best voices of all time.
Juliet Sims is the only reason I ever watched The Voice.
She should be the only reason anyone ever watched The Voice. But before that, she was in Automatic Love Letter, which was really just her. And then she had a traveling band where her brother was in. And she had an album, and it got overproduced. There were too many cooks in the kitchen, as she said before. And then she released an acoustic version of it, because it was just her songs. Beautiful. And then she did a Kickstarter for this EP, All or Nothing, and I contributed to that. And so she recorded, it's 5 or 6 songs. And it is just so incredible. She's such a good writer. She's such a good singer. And this is the kind of music I wish she was making all the time. And I hate record labels in general, but I really hate that not just record labels, but the whole thing surrounding her, she just kind of didn't get the kudos that she deserved.
Yeah.
In a way. And I know she says she's coming out with more stuff, and if she needs to do another Kickstarter, I will give her my money, because every song that she comes out with is so stunning, and she's such a nice person. Oh my god, listen to this album. If you listen to no other albums that I've talked about today, this EP, go listen to it, go buy it. It's like $5 for the EP. I mean, it is so good.
And if you want to do something before that, if you want like a little taste of what she does, go on YouTube and type in Juliet Simms, "Oh Darling," because I am a huge Beatles fan, and "Oh Darling" is one of Paul McCartney's greatest vocal performances of all time, and she blows it way out of the park. And Adam Levine is a huge Beatles fan. I'm not a big Adam Levine fan personally, but I know he's about as big of a Beatles fan as I am. And as soon as he heard what I heard, he hit that button so fast. It's not even funny. Because he knew exactly what I knew as soon as he heard that voice. As soon as he heard that pitch, he was like, oh man.
She has the most stunning voice. The best song on this album, the two best, I think, are, I really like Mystified and End of the World. End of the World I know she's been working on for a very long time, as a song that never really saw the light of day after ever. Mm-hmm. Stunning. Oh my god.
Speaking of amazing voices, I want to go back to a talking point that we had a little bit earlier in Adele. And I want to ask you, honestly, a question here. And this is not really a question about her specifically, because she is a great talent. But it's more of a question of the state of things.
Okay.
Adele. Is she the best? Or is she the best that we have been exposed to at the moment?
The best what?
In the genre. Like, what I mean by that is, I feel, and this is why I brought up 21, talking about how good it was.
But like the best what? Like the best singer, the best overall act,
well,
the best...
I'll explain it a little better. What I mean is, the way that Adele is being promoted is like you're...
A songstress.
Well, not even that. I feel like the way that they're promoting her album is like the greatest of all time is coming out with a new album, which is a good way to promote, but I feel like that's the way it's being received by the audience. I feel like that's the success that she's getting, like the insane chart-topping album and single performances, especially with Hello. I don't want to do that on pitch for copyright, but you know, like
oh my god.
Like I feel like that song in the album 24
25?
25, whatever. It was supposed to be 24. She hyped it as 24 and then she grew a year. I promise. That's a thing. It's a thing. She was like, oh, 24 is coming. And then like she grew a year. She was like, it'll be 25, whatever. And
I love Hello.
It's a very good song. It is a very good song. But if you look at like the idea of it, her voice is the entire song, which is totally fine.
Yeah, that's her.
It's totally fine. And I feel like that's a great premise for pop, which is a very overproduced aspect of music.
So to your question, though...
Well, my question is, she's getting a lot of success. She's very, very talented. Yeah. I completely agree with that. But I feel like the success that she's getting is because she doesn't have any competition. Not necessarily because she's incredible, but because there are other equally incredible singers that don't get the same leeway that she gets. So when she releases this insane, soulful, personal music and she gets all the success, it is a lot to do with the fact that everything else is being held back from being that. You understand what I'm saying? Like, that's why I'm wondering if she's doing so good in the charts, not just because she's so good, but just because she's the only one that's getting this leeway to be this good. Because she's a great singer. She's one of the best singers on the planet, but there are so many singers, especially in the music industry right now, let alone people that just gave up because it's not even worth trying to get into because they're not as marketable as other people. Like, there's so many great singers that could also be that powerful and that emotional. And clearly it sells. clearly it does. Like, that should be something that people are interested in.
I think to that question, it's really what you define as success. Because Adele is extremely successful. She wins Grammys. She's at the top of the charts. She's on TV all the time. All things indicators of success.
Mm-hmm.
Completely fine. I agree with that. However, equally successful to me, just purely popularity-wise, you could take someone like Beyonce.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't have the same voice that Adele does, but she's very successful, very popular. Would you agree?
Yes, and I feel like Beyonce is in a completely different spectrum because Beyonce's in the entertainment.
But this is what I'm trying to say. If you're saying pure pop music, right, as success, Adele is the most successful in exactly what she does.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she herself has a competitive advantage in her section for having such a voice. And her marketability is so much easier, so much better than other artists that are out there. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense.
When you're marketing something, I mean, who's Adele's typical consumer? If you think
everybody?
Of it. No, that's what you think. That's what you think. But people who are sitting in a room trying to market this girl is not thinking, oh, I'm just going to appeal to every single person. If you get every single person, quote unquote, every single person, then congratulations. But when you're putting something together and you're putting together a package to make her famous, because she's not just famous because she sings nice.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I hate to break it to people, but that's not what it is. Because like you said, there are millions of people who sing nice. But there are more reasons than that. So if you think of Adele's typical consumer, let's say, this is just an example, because there are many other facets to her appeal. Let's just say the average person is a young female, most likely white, with purchasing power, etc., etc. That girl can buy the album. That girl can buy the tickets to her shows. That girl can support her easily. You see what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying.
So, do I think Adele is the best? No. Do I think she's the best in her section, her segment? Yes.
Okay, so now this raises a second question. Because it's history shows. When something makes a lot of money, when something is as successful and unique as it is, it tends to make an explosion in the scene, in the music scene. Like Elvis. I know that's a little bit of a grand example for Adele. But, I mean, like, Elvis, Buddy Holly, all those guys in the 50s, Michael Jackson and Madonna in the 80s. Like, you have all of these, or even like Nirvana in the 90s. Like, you have all of these people that become so unique to what they do, and it ends up changing the entire music scene. So why? And I mean, this is more of a rhetorical question. I don't expect an honest answer. But why is it that Adele's on the radio and she produces really good music? And one thing that I love about Adele is that it's her and her songwriting partner, and they do it all. And that's something I give the highest amount of respect for, because there's people out there that have like a team of 20, and they just go and write whatever appeals the most, and that's what they send out there. So I respect her so much for being able to have this success on her own with a songwriting partner. But
then she also, I don't know how to put it, but people who have 20 people in a room is not because they don't want to have 20 people, or they want to have 20 people in the room. The thing is, Adele, also as a person, you can imagine, at least the way she set it up for herself, is that she wants to be the one in control.
Yeah, but I feel like that's the difference with her, is that she got successful and then got signed after being successful, to the point where she has the control over that.
Yeah,
Bruno Mars is another guy like that.
Yeah,
where
she can dictate what's going on in the studio.
Yeah, Bruno Mars is another guy that writes like 90% of his own music. He obviously has helped.
For a lot of people,
yeah, but he got famous doing other songs, being a studio musician, finding out what a talent he is, playing like 90 different instruments. And then when he got signed as an artist himself, he was able to have say over his artistic integrity and whatever, which I feel like is a huge point in today's pop music, is being able to have.
To be able to dictate what you're doing, if you know what you're doing.
But now, my question, as all these points build up, is Adele is so unique to herself. Why haven't the music industry capitalized on this genre that she monopolizes and said, hey, let's come out with other folky soul singers? Not necessarily that the genre should be watered down, but historically that's what happens. Historically, as soon as Madonna comes out with their first album, Paula Abdul comes right behind her.
There are 1,000 copycats. But I think in the case of copycats in general, not just musically but in business, if you're not a fast second, then you are a distant whatever.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I mean? So Adele, when she did build up a lot, obviously,
mm-hmm.
so she wasn't always this, mega star,
mm-hmm.
but she was essentially, of what she does, she was the first mover. But she built it up in such a way that she has a monopoly on her market.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have someone who was like a fast second, who was like right there after her, who, understood what's working, what's not working, how can I do this even better, then you might have someone who's competing. But that's not what people are thinking. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
because it's easier to replicate someone like, let's even take another modern pop person, someone like Taylor Swift. It's easier to replicate that kind of thing and be a fast second and do that a million times.
Mm-hmm.
Because cost, time, all that kind of different consideration, it's easy to turn that out. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah,
It's
totally
easy to be the copycat. But Adele, it's not easy to copy her. That's why I think she's the best in what she does.
Yeah.
But it's not easy to copy her, so even if you're second, you're so far behind at this point, and you don't have the same support system that she has basically capitalized on. Because if you jump into the music scene, right, like
mm-hmm.
we had discussed, she made herself successful, then she was signed, and then she had more dictation over what she was doing.
Yeah.
Other people don't have that. Other people are looking for ways to just get signed, get in there, and then be the second, but they don't have any control. So there's such a gap between first mover and then like a fast second, but there is no fast second.
I get that. I just find it really bizarre in the music world, because this is like really the first time that's really happening, where you just have like one person doing their own thing, and it's like completely unique to itself, and everything else is just so totally different around it. Like maybe like the Lumineers do like a little bit of folky soul stuff, but even still they haven't come out with a good single in like 4 years.
But isn't what Adele did in coming in, when everything is so much the same around her,
mm-hmm.
that's undercutting the market. So it's seeing that, everything's this one way, I'm undercutting it. That's such a different thing. People are gonna love that.
Yeah,
that's just how people work.
But that's not
but
like of Adele's or Adele's label's fault. I'm just saying,
no.
Why aren't other labels?
Because, like I said, the gap is too big. What could you possibly do to come out with someone and say they're going to compete with Adele at this point?
But these are questions that people have had for so long with various artists. Like, people had to come out and compete with Elvis. The Rolling Stones had to compete with the Beatles when they started the British invasion. People had to compete with Michael Jackson when Thriller came out. People had to compete with Madonna, and they succeeded too. Like, I'm just saying, I get that Adele is huge, but it's just the first time that everybody's just, like, okay with her being the only thing of her kind. Like, it's just amazing to me that nobody's thought to be like, hey, this is really successful. She just came out with this album, and now her hype is starting to die down a little bit. Maybe she's going to come out with a new single pretty soon because her hype's going a little down. But
before, when she had other albums out, she would take like 2 to 3 years in between every album. So I guess your question to these record labels could also be, what are you doing in her downtime?
That's what I'm saying.
But if you take someone, I'm not saying that this is a direct comparison, but if you take a singing, like, I feel like because she's a British artist, this is what I would relate it to. If you go to the British market, for example, you have people who are competing with her. Like, if you take someone like Paloma Faith,
mm-hmm.
Paloma Faith does that, and she's very popular. She's not Adele, but she's consistently, well received. She has her albums. People go to her tours. She sells out when she comes here. She doesn't play big venues, but she sells out when she comes here. But that's another factor you have to think about. This is a British import.
Yeah.
As opposed to American artists where we export everywhere else.
Yeah.
Because that's another big thing, because people say if you make it in America, you make it anywhere. So when someone like Adele is here and she makes it here, and we all see her as like, there's no one else like her. There's no one else like her in our market, but that's why she's successful. Because when she's coming here, she's not a cheap imitation of someone else in our market already. And our market is essentially the world market. She's not a cheap...
As far as media goes, yeah.
Yeah, as far as media goes, our market is like the world market. And if there's not another person like her here, we're seeing this authenticity, and we're like, yes, this is great. Let's run with it.
Yeah.
So that's another thing you have to consider. I mean, there are other people competing with Adele, but the people competing with Adele are thinking her home market, her domestic market, rather than here. Because America here, I mean, she's not ours. At the end of the day.
Yeah, that's really true. I never really thought about that aspect of it, of the foreign aspect, and the fact that we as a market in America might be strangleholding ourselves from experiencing that, which I find really funny, because you would think if history proves anything, America should be like, hell yeah, bring in all the British people. Like, I feel like every time...
It's not a novelty anymore.
Yeah, that's true. And I also feel like a big part of it is that most of the British artists that came over were of the rock and roll variety, and now it's starting to spill over into the pop variety, because rock and roll's kind of like not like belly up stale, but like it kind of like flatlined a little bit because the attitude of it kind of went corporate.
It's no longer the rebel genre.
It's corporate. It's the corporate genre, and I'm not too worried about that, because there will be a point where hip hop becomes the new corporate genre, because it's slowly becoming that. And then once hip-hop becomes the corporate genre, it's going to be one of those things where once rock and roll gets cast to the side, it's going to go way underground and build itself back up again with a whole new style. So that might take decades, but it'll be pretty cool to watch when that does eventually happen. So,
you have to think about it. Like, even someone before Adele, Leona Lewis,
mm-hmm.
she got super popular here. She was a British import, and she saw another songstress who was very much, you belted, she's not a lot of gimmick. And she did very well here. I mean, but in her home market, after that first album, she wasn't that as big of a deal. And so there wasn't another import. Whereas Adele, like, she kept having imports coming in. So you have to think about that aspect too.
Definitely. I agree. That's definitely a very interesting point on her. But that's why I wanted to bring it up, is because I feel like there's a lot of music going around that doesn't get the success that it deserves, and then there's some albums that come out and get just insane amount of success that nobody really sees coming. And that was one of my last points I wanted to make here, if you wanted to comment on it, is this album that I found that is the greatest album it will be in time. I can't imagine in the next 4 years. I would love to be proven wrong, but I do not think that there's going to be an album in the next 4 years that tops this album. And it will be the album of the decade. And it came out in 2010, so that's a big deal. And it's one of those albums that could be considered one of the best pop albums of all time. And the numbers prove that it's the best pop album, the best female pop album of all time. Do you want to have a guess at what this album is?
Is it Lady Gaga's album?
No, it is not Lady Gaga's album, but you are close. It is Teenage Dream by Katy Perry. Is the most successful female pop album of all time. Not necessarily by sales numbers, but just by quality of music in album. 5 number 1 hits, 8 top 5. 5 number 1 hits on one album. The album only had like 9 songs. 5 number 1 hits ties Michael Jackson's Bad for most number 1 hits on one album.
No, I know how successful it is, and I've seen Katy Perry, and I like that album. I don't know what to say other than she's a hit maker. I mean, she used to write, same kind of situation with Kesha, Lady Gaga, all these other people. She used to write songs for a lot of people. She knows what makes it work. She also has a lot of, because I don't know if you've seen her documentary, I saw that. And, in and out of record labels, too many cooks in the kitchen, all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
But after a certain point, someone really did believe in what she was putting out there, and she was able to have the control that she wanted to do this kind of album. I mean, she obviously has a lot of writers with her and things like that,
Yeah.
but she had a very clear avenue she was going down, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I really feel like one of the reasons that Katy Perry has a lot of writers isn't necessarily because she needs to have a lot of writers, but because she was one.
I see that.
She feels compelled to have a team because she understands the dynamics of it.
And she also understands what makes a pop song. If you have that kind of, like, even with Kesha's songs, you heard that on the radio a million gazillion times. They know what it is to make a pop song. I think Katy Perry is very aware what makes a good pop song, what makes a good pop show, what makes a pop star, and that's why she can package her entire self as this. Because if you think about Katy Perry, this is the same girl that I saw on Warped Tour in 2008.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you told someone who didn't really know anything about Katy Perry went to Warped Tour. She was touring around with a bunch of, like, sweaty dudes for, like, 5 months in the summer or something like that. Would people think that? No.
It's insane. But, I mean, this girl came out with 5 number 1 hits on one album that all came out within the span of a year and a half. A lot of people don't remember that, like, 2010, 2011 was, like...
It was Katy Perry.
It was just all Katy Perry. And it's one of those things where, like, she has a great voice. Again, and this is coming from someone very unbiased, because I'm not even a big fan of the style. But you can't deny how good it is. Like, it's still really good and really successful. Like, this album was just insane, which is the quality amount of music. And a lot of people, like, I don't know, because again, I don't really follow her too much. I don't know how successful her most recent releases have been following Teenage Dream. I know she came out with Prism, right?
It was just Prism, and I don't know the numbers or anything, but it's not Teenage Dream.
But that's the thing, is that Teenage Dream is the greatest, most successful female pop album ever. Like, you can't, in terms of hits on the album, it is the greatest female pop album. Not in terms of sales or plays or anything like that, but in terms of just general hits, that's your album if you're looking for a female pop album. So that's one of those situations where, like, you can't raise the bar much higher than that. Like, unless you're going for, like, 7 number 1 hits on one album.
Tapestry by Carole King. Number 1 on Billboard for, like, months.
Yeah, but, like, that's a whole argument for a whole different thing. Because now you're talking about Billboard being outdated.
Well, but also I was going to say also her album was number 1, whereas Katy Perry had, like, 5 separate, like, every song was a hit, as well as the album.
Yeah. That album, I remember not realizing how successful it was when it was out, only until Russell Brand posted a tweet about it. And I know that's really hilarious in hindsight, but back then Russell Brand was married to Katy Perry, for those not in the know. And
what kind of thing is that? Everyone knows that.
You don't know who listens to our podcast, okay? Listen. So, for those not in the know, let me just sit down for a minute if you're not. And let me tell you that Russell Brand, at one point, the British comedian guy who insults everybody.
Why are you doing that? I hope you edit this out. I'm going to keep talking over you so you edit it out.
But he tweeted something along the lines of, Katy Perry just had her 5th number 1. And I was like, of all time? That's not bad. And then I was like, oh, on this album? Oh my god. That's a big deal. And then I remembered looking the album up and finding out that there's only like 9 songs. Over half the songs were hits. And 8 of the 9 went top 5. Like, that's insane. That's one of the most complete albums ever. I'm sorry to go in on this album, but I just figured if we're talking about albums, I wanted to talk about one that most people don't realize is an all-time great, but in years to come will be an all-time great.
It will be. And a lot of people, I mean, I think a lot of pop stars, female pop stars will model themselves after that album too. I mean, now that they know this is what works, it's going to be another case of, can I repackage this person? What was good? What can I do better? And
Yeah.
Put another person out there.
Yeah. So, do you have any other talking points you'd like to hit up today?
No.
On albums? Any closing remarks?
We need a name for this
We need
podcast.
a name. We need a name. Okay? So we need a name. We should call it the Katy Perry Podcast.
I would not want to do that at all.
I'm pretty sure we'd get sued anyway, so we're not going to call it the Katy Perry Podcast. We should call it, I don't know. Tell us what we should call it. You probably know us, you listening there. You probably know who we are. Chances are.
So this has been Coco and Lizzie. And that's how we're going to end this show. I hope you enjoyed listening to it. If you have suggestions for ideas for next time, let us know. Leave your comments down below. I'm sure this will be on SoundCloud. And somehow I'm going to figure out how to put it on iTunes. And I'm going to build us a website, so there'll probably be a space for comments there.
She's doing all the work.
I'm doing all the online work, but he's doing all the editing. So good luck.
Thanks. So yeah, next week, I believe we're doing live performances.
Yes.
Yes, so we're going to do live performances next week, but thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed. See ya.
Bye.